My name is Ayana Robinson. I graduated from Western in spring of 2013, and I was a bioanth major, bio and anthropology with a minor in chemistry. So I was in the first cohort of LeaderCorps, which would have been, let's see, in fall of 2012. Yeah. And I actually felt like it was pretty random fate that I ended up in that cohort. At the time, I was working with prevention and wellness services, and I was working downstairs here in the VU at the Wellness Outreach Center. And Joanne put out sort of a notification to everyone that if they had students who might be interested in basically peer leadership training, then we should, reach out to her. So my involvement in the class was kind of serendipitous. I think that at the time, I'm not sure that I understood how that sort of fit into what I was doing. It wasn't, the focus wasn't necessarily on healthcare. The focus wasn't necessarily specifically on social justice. So I didn't understand going in how this fit in. I didn't know what to expect. But I think that the experiences that I had there were very important. And not only for sort of the maybe more straightforward things about, it looked good on my resume and therefore I got to go to graduate school. Not like that. The skills that I learned there, I use every day now in the job that I have currently, and I'm very confident I'll continue to use them in my career. My experience in LeaderCorps was the first time that I had training in basically how to design an adult education platform, and I ended up using those skills. Now I use them for children, but the reality is that it was mirrored in my experience being trained and working in public health. So it was the first time that I was trained in needs assessment, creating actually achievable learning objectives, and practically translating learning objectives into a curriculum, and a curriculum that's engaging and interesting to people, that actually takes advantage of the way that people generally think and feel, as opposed to just shooting facts at people, which, especially having training and background in the hard sciences, was not something that I was really familiar with. And in reality, and also on the other end of that, monitoring and evaluating whether or not your program or intervention worked, whether or not people learned what it was that you intended. And those skills are important for basically anything that you want to do that is creative. If your intention in your career is to create a program, an idea, a business, a movement, you need to have those skills. So in my roles as a graduate student, as a program director, as an activist, those have ended up to being very important. In the group project that we worked on during my time at LeaderCorps, the group that we selected to do our needs assessment for was HANDS, which is a program, unfortunately, that's no longer running, but it operated out of the admissions office, and it's helping to admit new and diverse students. Basically, the goal of the program was to do community outreach to local high schools, particularly reaching kids who had already identified themselves as wanting additional help or support in the process of going on to post-secondary education. So they wanted assistance, if they were freshmen and sophomores, they wanted to learn more about college, wanted to just meet people who had been to college, which was definitely something that for a lot of them was new. And for the juniors and seniors, we were helping them with the actual process of applying, making decisions, understanding financial aid. And I happened to be part of that group already, and I knew that they had very little training basically at all for that position, and so we decided as a group that we would try and focus on them to see what we could do to help. We assessed a lot of things. One of the themes that emerged was that the HANDS mentors in general were a group of people who were committed to basically educational equity and really thinking about who ends up having access to college and who doesn't. However, they definitely seemed to have trouble translating their intrinsic experiences, the things that they had seen or witnessed, their own experiences going to college, to working directly with the kids. They had trouble verbalizing their experiences. They sometimes felt uncomfortable, worrying that they were being, they were oversharing or not sharing enough. And so what we decided to focus on is a technique, a way of thinking that's called self-authorship. And to oversimplify it, basically self-authorship is the process of iteratively thinking about what your narrative is and building narrative out of your collective experiences, so that in response to your environment and in response to the people and the things that you experience, you can somewhat determine and be able to express what that means to you, I guess is the simplest way to put it. And so we ended up working with the Hands mentors. We designed a workshop for them that was included in their spring training, and they were able to show that they were much more able to communicate with their mentees as a result of that training. And actually the module ended up being used for several other student groups on campus, and I continue to use parts of that modules in the trainings that I do now with the college interns that I work with. One of the principles that we focused on in that module was mindfulness, and the practice of mindfulness is something that basically is great for working professionally with others, but it's also really important for personal development. And I continue to use it all the time in my own life, and I really try and teach it to the interns that I work with now. And basically the principle of mindfulness, it can be broken down into several things, but the main idea is to truly practice and improve your ability to be present in your current moment and to analyze in real time the thoughts, feelings, attitudes, assumptions, and biases that pass through your mind when you are doing something. So in my conversations or my work now, say I'm working with a child who is overweight. Practicing mindfulness in that moment will mean that as I'm talking with this person, I'm also trying to take a step back and realize, where are these words that I am saying coming from? What are the stereotypes that are operating in this situation? What do I inherently believe about this person who's sitting across the table from me? How does that impact the services that I'm offering them, the way that I'm talking to them? How much investment do I have in this interaction, and why? What ways is this about serving the person, and what ways is this about serving me? In what ways are the voices of my mother, my mentors, my professors operating in this? So basically, if, like me, you're going to work with people, and most of us will work with people, in particular, I found that mindfulness is important for learning how to create and establish healthy boundaries with the people that you work with. And particularly because I'm largely motivated by a deep demand and passion for justice, the things that I believe to be right, it's very important that that I can practice learning when that's about me, or when it's about the person I'm working with, or if it's about what we're doing here together. So mindfulness is a part of that. Originally, I planned on being a doctor, a physician, and I realized pretty early on that I knew almost nothing about being a physician or about healthcare at all. So I went through a long period of wondering, who am I and what am I doing here? And I tried to explore a lot of different aspects of human health and tried to learn a little more about health as a system. So societally as a system, how Americans think about health culturally and how that varies by subculture. and really trying to get invested in how could I combine two things that I'm very passionate about, which were health and medicine and social justice, because that was really what medicine was lacking, was that I care deeply about racial justice and about racial and ethnic health disparities and about gendered health disparities. And the vast majority of clinicians don't address those issues. So how was it going to be that I could combine these two things that seemed extremely different and, if anything, alien to one another? After I graduated, I decided, at that point I had started to discover that in fact there were clinicians who did this kind of work, who combined those two fields, but almost all of them had training in health systems in some aspect, because you don't really get that in medical school. So I decided to pursue a master's in public health. I moved to Boston and went to Boston University, and I focused there on maternal and child health, specifically on racial health disparities and class-based health disparities that impact women and children. So generally, an MPH is a 2-year program. The program at BU makes it possible for you to do the vast majority of the coursework component in the first year and spend the second year doing work, if that's what you'd like to do. I originally planned on serving in the Peace Corps and actually applied to the Peace Corps and got a placement, and ended up deciding to turn it down, which surprised everyone, including me. I think that I got reinvigorated during my public health experience in domestic health disparities. I think a lot of times people are very aware of and feel extremely committed to the concept of someone suffering very far away in a way that we're not attached to. But in reality, we're part of a system right here that is constantly creating opportunities for some and lack of opportunities for others. So I decided to stay here and work here. And so I set about trying to find work to do for the second half. I'm in my second year now. And I found a job working as the program coordinator for a nonprofit in rural Oregon, of all places. And so I started there at the beginning of the academic year. And there I'm able to work with kids, particularly kids who are overweight and obese and their families. And what we do is we try and provide support and services to help kids basically live healthier lifestyles, especially those who are part of families who are already experiencing social and economic barriers to those things. So who are experiencing poverty, who are part of a subculture that is generally not included in the hierarchy, language barriers, and just the discrimination and bullying that's common for kids in that situation to experience. I'm in the process of applying to medical school now. I have several offers for this coming fall. Having a hard time deciding which school I'm going to go to, honestly, but that's the best case scenario, right? So feeling really thankful about that. So far I have 5 offers for medical school. The University of Washington in Seattle, the University of Michigan in Ann Arbor, Washington University in St. Louis, Boston University, and the University of California in San Diego.